Today we have Rick, and what I do is really quick introductions. And here's Rick.
Okay, thank you. Well, what a beautiful place. This is nice. I'm kind of new to the area. I just retired out of Napa. I was working at a place called Mondavi Winery for a few years on the winemaking team. There, I put a bio on there, but briefly, yeah, I don't want to say I came from a little hick town in Canada and became somebody in Napa. So I was the cork dork. I help people convert from cork to screw caps. I've been involved at the end with 22 winemakers at the same time. And Constellation bought Prisoner. I was the guy that had to go over there and make sure they kept our standards up and all that type of stuff. So I've been around in wine ever since I remember. My first memory in my life was with my great uncle on his farm. My dad was a carpenter, no work in the wintertime. We'd go help him out on the farm. And the very first memory I have is this loving memory of helping my great uncle with his cherry wine still, making cherry brandy. So that's, but anyways, just to get an idea of the audience, I golf over here, and we have in the Duffers, we have A, B, and C, D players. The D being like the guys that just know which end of the stick to hold. With wine, it's kind of the same. How many would, like D wine people would be the ones that are still using sippy cups, and you know, they do mix their Coca-Cola with their Chardonnays a little bit. But C, you know, you pretty well use it in a glass, and you know that. B's, hey, you know wine, you buy wine, you look at the labels and guess that this one is going to be good because the label's pretty. And then there's like the A player that like they have 200. Oops.
No, you're fine.
We have, for example, you'd have a $200, $300, $400 wine opener with bone handle, and it's engraved and the whole bit. And I use it to open a bottle of $2 Chuck. So you know that's it. So how many would classify themselves as like, I could see that you're here, so you're not a D, but just to get an idea, C players, B players, A players that are really, you got $1,000 bottles of wine in your cellar too. Okay, so I'll give you an idea. Today we're going to be talking about, first of all, I want to thank my brother-in-law, Bob Dennison. He's a chef for the Pistons, the Red Wings. He served Muhammad Ali and even served a meal for the Queen. Anyways, he's retired now, but he's augmented my speech today because we're going to be talking about wine and foods. So he sent me a bunch of information that he would probably, which helped me out tremendously. So I want to make sure that he gets a little bit of glory for that. And we'll go to the next one that didn't move. Hey, boss. It's probably me, not
Probably set it up.
that button.
Yeah.
There we go.
Sorry.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about a brief history of wine and food, understanding wine flavors, the wine aroma wheel. I'm going to talk about a little bit, base and bridge ingredients. Current wine food dynamics with 5 common wines, wine and food pairing suggestions, ordering wine at a restaurant, which is sometimes very interesting. And then finally, I'm going to open it up for questions because usually with my seminars, I usually end up with questions about cork or whatever else you want to ask about, savory champagnes or whatever. Okay. So the history of wine and food. Prior to the 1920s, there was not that much thought about with wine pairing. There wasn't that much traveling. Regions basically had their own wine, their own foods, and that was about it. There were fewer wineries, fewer choices, made their wines based on the foods they ate and so on. During the 20s, that's where food writers started to make up their own rules. And some of these rules were white wine with white food and red wine with red foods, red meats. Well, I could cook chicken 4 different ways, and you would have 4 different, completely different wines with it. I could do a Cajun chicken, and you'd be doing a Zinfandel would probably be a good match. You could have a buttery sauce with the chicken, which would go with great with a buttery Chardonnay, and barbecue with a Syrah or a light Merlot, possibly, or even a light cab, and so on. So the ingredients are more important than the base. And then we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Then in 31, the Michelin Guide came out, and that's where things started to pick up a little bit. All these writers were making up these weird rules and it was getting too much. So Lisa started to get a little bit more organized. And then finally, we've got ourselves the systematic approach where they started to break down flavors and so on. And that kind of really helped out. And then we finally got to the point where the Judgment of Paris. Does anybody know what the Judgment of Paris is? Well, anyways, what happened, the French always had the wines. And Mondavi started up a bunch of his winery. And two of his winemakers went out and started their own wineries. And he wanted to develop Napa as a wine region. And what happened, they went around and they selected these two wines from California to compete in this great Paris wine thing. Well, Napa won the best white wine and the best red wine. And it made headlines. That's called the Judgment of Paris. And the French were upset in the whole bit, but it was French judges who actually selected our wines. We have different, and it just opened up Napa completely to what's going on out here, and more wineries. We used to have apricot, pear, peach trees, all that stuff. That was all tilled under, and now they're selling acres for, I think $57,000 for a little piece of dirt anymore in that area. So it's grown up. We've got some of the best restaurants. We've got French Laundry, as you know, was a world-class restaurant, and others are just as good. And it's just developed so on. So the food and our wines have just developed tremendously since that time. Each wine variety has its own distinct colors, flavors, aromas. They're so separate. And same thing, due to climatic changes, we're seeing changes every year. We are seeing that some of the Cabernets, some of the descriptors we're going to see that are defects in the wines. We'll get to that when we get to the wine wheel. And we're seeing a little bit more of that now in certain areas where sometimes the grapes are too quick to develop. I could take 4 clones that are identical, DNA identical, plant them in 4 different regions in California. They will harvest at different times. They will taste completely different. They will sell for a hell of a lot more in price, from $8 a bottle to $1,000 a bottle if I put it in Tokelau Vineyard, where Opus One and Screaming Eagle and some of the Mondavi wines are. And so that's changing. Everything is shifting a little bit. Colder regions are now producing a little bit better wines. Hotter regions are getting too hot now. So things are still changing, and that changes the flavor of the foods. So one vintage might taste fantastic. The next vintage might be a little bit different. So we're seeing a lot more changes. And that does affect your wine selection sometimes. The culinary adaptations, the changes, we're seeing the ethnic cuisines coming into play. We're seeing fusion cuisines. We're adding Sino-Italian restaurants now in San Francisco, experimental cuisines with dry ice and all these different things we're trying to pair wines with, and the emergence of textures where food textures are being blended together. And we're trying to match that with the wine styles and blends. Now, wines used to just have Cabernets and Sauvignon, and now we're seeing blends, which really help add to the flavors. It's sort of like a painter who now has 50 more colors on their palette that they could use now. And that's what we're seeing a lot more of. There's a lot more wine regions and wine styles. Okay, base and bridge ingredients. When you have a base ingredient, is simply a direct link of flavor and aromas in both the wine and the food. It's buttery, the Chardonnay is buttery, the food is buttery, it's a good pair. But sometimes a pepperoni pizza and Zinfandel is that black pepper flavor, and a pizza tastes really good together. A bridging ingredient is something that you add to the food that ties the wine together. So we'll discuss that a little bit more. So it's kind of the main ingredient ties directly into the wine flavor. A good bridging ingredient turns a poor pairing into a great pairing. A bold Cabernet and lamb. Use herbs such as sage and rosemary on the lamb, and all of a sudden that wine tastes a lot better. So just little things like that. Now for base ingredients, seafood of all kinds, crab cakes, lobster, shrimp, dripping with butter, garlic, chicken, turkey, game, hen, duck, so on. Bridge ingredients are sometimes just little things like nutmeg, cinnamon, allspice, but not sweetness. Think savory, hazelnuts, cashews, butter, brown butter, sour cream, olive oil, bacon, ham, and other cured pork products, mushrooms, onions, and garlic would sometimes tie a weaker food into a higher wine. And we'll talk a little bit more about that individually. Oops. Now we'll go to some 5 different wines. I'll try to compare some of the aromas and taste. So typical Sauvignon Blanc. You've got the green apple, apricot, lime, lemon, so on, pineapple, gooseberry. Sauvignon Blanc is a wine that you can teach real easily to taste it, and you know exactly where it's from. You can taste lemongrass, I know it's from Lake County, California. You can taste melon, you know it's from Napa. You can taste the New Zealand, the grapefruit. It's a very powerful grapefruit flavor. So it's one that the flavors of a Sauvignon Blanc really tie in well with different foods, and they also change dramatically from region to region. And when it says there, hay, straw, wildflowers, there's a whole variety of stuff that you get in there. And some of it is also mineral, yes. It tastes almost like chalk in some areas, and Paso Robles, and chemical. Now, sometimes you get what's called, with Sauvignon Blanc, cat pee. It's not a defect, it's from a certain area that you could actually, you smell it, that's actually what it smells like. Doesn't taste it, still tastes good, but you actually get this. Some certain French regions, that's where they actually have that flavor in there. I had to put it on there, I couldn't resist. Okay, basic ingredients that you'd mix with Sauvignon Blanc would be shellfish, white, lean fish, chicken breast, and turkey. A bridge ingredient to tie in sort of like a beef thing would be tender herbs, mint, tarragon, basil, cilantro, dill. So you could tie in actually Mexican food with this, the right ingredients. Buttery olive oil, flaky buttery crust, yeast bread, goat cheese, roasted garlic, Dijon mustard, capers, prosciutto, eggplant, so on. Ties that into another flavor. And we'll go to Chardonnay. With a base Chardonnay, again, you could get Chardonnay that's heavily oaked, non-oaked, buttery. There's a whole variety of flavors just in Chardonnay, how the winemaker wants that wine to be. But the base ingredients is seafood of all kinds, crab cakes, lobster, shrimp, butter, garlic, chicken, turkey, game, and duck, and so on. Bridge ingredients that tied together are basically the same as a Sauvignon Blanc. Savory. Think about savory. Again, pork, ham, mushrooms. Again, Dijon mustard seems to turn in an awful lot with these bridge ingredients. And again, Dijon mustard's from France. Who's the top wine producer? Okay. Chardonnay. The main aromas of a Chardonnay are fruity, green apple, red apple. You got the caramel flavors, the nutty, the yeast-derived toast, baked bread, oatmeal, popcorn, very buttery, most of them now. Buttery Chardonnay seems to be popular. I know Chardonnay seems to be popular as well. But there are some very heavily oaked Chardonnays, very strong, that need a very strong base with it. Okay, Pinot Noir, fruity. I mean, it's a beautiful wine. This one here is a very delicate wine, very light colored. It's one that can be very fruity, or it could be earthy. It could have like barnyard smoke. It can be over oaked. If a winemaker's not paying attention, they use an over oak barrel. You can kill the flavor of a Pinot sometimes. And I do pick that up every now and again out there in the market. You could get a floral flavor, and you could get the wood derived one I talked about a little bit earlier. Barrel aging, sometimes they cannot be overdone. Rhone wines are very easily over oaked. I did a Charbonneau, and that you just barely touch the oak, and I ended up winning a gold medal at the California State Fair with it. But again, you just touch oak to some of these, and with some of these wines, once it's oaked, like a Cabernet, that oak changes into a beautiful flavor down the road. With some of the other wines, that oak will not change. It's just oaky right till the time you pour it down the sink or drink it. Now, the base ingredient for a Pinot, again, pork belly, toasted chicken, veal, rabbit, quail, most seafoods. And the bridge ingredient is garlic, roasted root vegetables, tomato sauces, help. That really ties in with a Pinot. Garlic, shallots, onions, basil, pesto. Basil is a good one too. That really makes a Pinot pop. It really goes together with it. And of course, cherries, cranberries, something like that on a turkey. If you put cranberries on it, that Pinot is just perfect with it. Now let's go to Merlot. This one here is still a very popular one. Has anybody seen the movie, was it, where the guys travel sideways? Do you know the joke that nobody got that cost Napa billions of dollars? Is that he was saying, what did he think about Merlot? Well, I won't repeat it, but he was very detrimental to Merlots. The whole thing, joking about it, killed Napa Merlots. But in that movie, you know that French bottle that he has, that very expensive French bottle at the end, he drinks out of a Dixie cup, that he cherished this bottle, is 100% Merlot. That was a hidden joke that cost, we couldn't get rid of our Merlots in Napa. We had to blend it down. Oh, by the way, something I could add right here. When you buy a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, is it Cabernet Sauvignon? Unless it says 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, it could be only 75. And you could have 25% Merlot that we had to get rid of, or something else in there. So unless it says 100%, we'll talk about wine labels a little later on. So anyways, that's a little piece of information. So you've got fruity, very fruity. Some of these things are delicious. And you can get them over oak. You can get the cedar, cocoa, cigar, tobacco flavor. But normally the oak changes to vanilla. With Cabernets and Merlots, you get this little light, beautiful taste that really matches well with the fruitiness. And you get cinnamon, clove, licorice. You'll see anise flavors in Merlot quite a bit. Same thing with Cabernets. It'll show up every now and again. That's not a defect. That's just how that is that year. Candy fruit, fruit cake, sandalwood, truffles, and tobacco. Tobacco does show up a bit too. Again, it's sometimes you can pick it up, but it doesn't affect the flavor. It still tastes great. Any questions at all? Just, no? Is anybody here a sommelier? So I could just make up crap and get away with it? Okay. So Merlot, the base ingredients, duck breast, legs, confit, rack of lamb, squab. Squab, you know what squab is, everybody? Pigeon? Okay. The French call it squab. Grilled salmon, venison, bridge ingredients, again, garlic, olives, Dijon mustard shows up again, eggplant, mushrooms, all that stuff ties in to a lighter wine. So it kind of bridges that gap, fills it up. Typical aromas of a Cabernet. You've got fruitiness, blackberry, blueberry. You've got the whole gamut with Cabernet. I've tasted them. They're just absolutely amazing. Most of our high-end California wines, we're talking Opus One, Screaming Eagle, our To Kalon vineyards, most of our base is Cabernet. Not so much in France, not so much in Italy or Spain. They all have their own separate flavors that they build upon. In certain regions in Burgundy, you can only use these particular grapes. And it has to be only these grapes. You can't add something from outside. Same thing with Italy. Italy had these regions that had to be specified. You can only use these grapes. You can only charge this price. You can only do so much. And then a bunch of Italian winemakers said, no, we're not going to follow these rules. We're going to do something different. We're going to make a wine. We're going to use Sangiovese. We're going to use Cabernet Sauvignon, which is, no, you can't do that. That's impossible. And then you're going to throw in some Malbec, Petit Verdot, and maybe one other wine. And they made a most delicious Super Tuscan wine. And it was totally against the rules. And it was absolutely put Italy back on the map again for wines. And it's one of the biggest wine regions to visit now, is Tuscany. And these are just breakaway wineries. They said, no, we're not going to follow your rules. France, if they try to do something like that, they would have strikes. They'd have people blocking the roads. They have a caste system of wineries where they have the Grand Crus, and you have all these other ones as they drop down the list. And you can make a phenomenal top of the line wine. And you've been doing it for years, and they put them into, this actually happened. They put this one winery into a Grand Cru, and there were major strikes. There was shutdowns, there was major issues. How dare they do that? And that company had to not only drop their wine down again, they had to strip all the labels off their wines and go back again. So that's why France is kind of fallen behind. They're so regimented. You must use these and only these grapes at Burgundy. You can only use these grapes and only these grapes all the way across the country. And no changes, no nothing. That's why California all of a sudden, we're going to make a Cabernet with only Cabernet. Or we've got blends now that are just whatever the winemaker wants to paint with whatever color he wants, he's to do it. And if it doesn't sell, that works. We don't have the government telling us, or a wine consortium telling us what we can and can't do. And that's why we kind of leaped ahead of them quite a bit. But French still make great wines. They've got some really good Chateau, I can't remember which one, Chateau Neuftepape. And that one there is a beautiful, delicious wine. Okay. All right. Base ingredients, well, Cabernet, you've got a wide range of Cabernets, very light to very heavy. But grilled steak, veal, buffalo, lamb, anything like that, barbecued, a good Cabernet just seems to go well. But if you're having it with chicken or something, you can always do demi-glaze sauces, complex Indian spices go well with it. Again, not hot, olives, mushrooms, red beets, eggplant, roasted tomatoes, rosemary, sage, thyme, and nuts, and cow's milk cheese. I could do a whole talk just about cheese and wine pairings, but that's one that a good cheddar cheese, good aged cheddar cheese, the Cabernet just, or an aged smoked Gouda and a Cabernet just seem to go well together. Okay, now I'm going to go into a little generalization that kind of helps out a little bit. And again, my eyes are pretty bad. Generalized wine and food pairings and sweetness in food. If you've got a sweet food, it's going to make the wine taste better. The more sweet it is, the more bitter it's going to be. Acidity and alcohol in the wine. The wine should be sweeter than the food. And finding sweet wines is sometimes difficult. So if you have a sweet food, you may not want to go with the Cabernet. You have to find something a little bit lighter. High food acidity increases the perception of sweetness and fruitiness of the wine. It's almost the opposite. High acid foods should be matched with high acid wines. A young Cabernet, by young, I'm saying something that's maybe 3 to 4 years from Napa. And not just from California, but if it says Napa, that way you still have what's called astringency, where you've got this puckering flavor in the wines. It can actually taste really good with food. That's this way with the high food acid. Chili heat in food. This tends to increase the bitterness, alcohol, and acidity of the wine. sweet wines with a high degree of either spiciness or fruitiness will work there. A sangria is one of the ones that does work well. Salty foods need a slightly sweet wine with soft fruit flavor. So possibly a Merlot, a nice soft Syrah, sometimes even a Pinot will work there too. Greasy fat foods, these are really tough sometimes. Easily diminish the flavor of low acid sweet wines. If you've got fatty foods, you've got a weak wine, that wine flavor is going to completely disappear. You need something really stronger to go down with that. If it grows together, it goes together. Now, this is something that Bob sent me. He's really into that. Foods from a particular region, country will inevitably pair well together. Prosciutto and Sauvignon Blanc, and so on. They have both evolved together over centuries. Barbera and grilled vegetables. Red meats, and this is the one too that he sent was interesting. Red meats, rare versus well done. If you do a medium rare steak and a well done steak, they will taste completely different with the wines that you serve. So that's an interesting one that he sent over here. A young red cab becomes less astringent with high protein, rare, I won't say, well, bloody meats sort of thing, steak. A well done beef served with a fruitier wine such as Merlot. So that was an interesting take on it. And basically, the bottom line, match your wine to the strongest flavor on the plate. It may not be the meat, it might be the vegetable, it might be, whatever else it is, but that's where that one goes to. Any questions on whatever? I rattled through a lot of things there. Does it make sense to everybody? I hope if you could get one thing out of anything I do today, it's a success. So maybe there's one little thing you can glean. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about something that's interesting, ordering wines in a restaurant. Now, how many people here, first of all, Arizona, in California, you could take a bottle of wine. In many states, you could take a bottle of wine to the restaurant itself and open it up there. How many people come from a state where you could do that? Or province, no? Yeah, and it's kind of cool. There is one restaurant that I know of here in the valley where you can do that. There is an Italian restaurant where you can actually bring a bottle in and you pay a corkage fee. And it's, I think, $20 or $25, but the rest of the time you have to order their wines.
Is that legal?
It is legal. You have to buy a special thing for their license. And so most of them don't do it yet.
Illegal, like Colorado, California.
Oh, I say everything. Well, it makes sense because it's pure profit for with the Air Force, for example, we opened up a wine tasting room for them. And at first, I'm coming from work, I'm donating wine to the guys who can't do that. Well, what if I pay a corporate fee? Well, no, it's still legal. I said, well, think about it. For $15, charge me a bottle of wine, you don't have to buy it, you don't have to store it, you don't have to do anything. It's $15 other than provide a glass, it's pure profit. They found that they made more money on us bringing our bottles of wine where they didn't have to open, pour in the whole bit, just give the bottle, put a tag on it, and away they went. And the Air Force allowed it. That proved to be successful. Which restaurants do we have in Green Valley? Oh, Ragazzi, I don't know if I could mention names or not, but that would be one that I think that I could bring a bottle to. And that's a good one to bring a Zinfandel to, because of the Italian foods and the fats and the whole bit. What's that? Yeah, it's you call them up and then when you talk to them, you bring a bottle in for corkage, they have a corkage fee for that. They're the only one that I found so far. If anybody finds any more, please let me know. It'll be very interesting. So, what was I prattling about? Was there anything else on that topic? I forget. Okay, you pay a corkage fee, and so you're at a table of 6 to 8 friends, and because you attended a seminar like this, your buddy over there says, okay, you order the wines, and you get this wine list, and it depends on the restaurant. Now, sometimes what happens, you're going to say, okay, I'll order the wine. What's everybody eating? And there's salmon, pork, fruit reduction sauce, a couple of steaks, barbecue chicken, and fettuccine. Yeah, it's like, okay, that's it. Maybe you start off with a sparkling wine. Maybe that wouldn't be bad. Everybody could cleanse their palate and start off with something like that, but a crisp white wine will cover a lot of it. I really like the Vinho Verdes from Portugal. Very crisp. It's like a Sauvignon Blanc on steroids, I think. It's very crisp, very green apple, very, very flavorful, and it cuts through a lot of stuff. A buttery Chardonnay for the buttery things, and also it covers some of the sauces and so on. And a medium but young Cabernet Sauvignon. That's what I start with. Now, that is just a rough idea as to what's going on with that type of a mix like that. And everybody's pretty happy, and you'll probably have to end up ordering another bottle anyways. After 3 or 4 bottles, things get, well, it doesn't matter anyways. You could open a beer and I don't think they'd notice. Okay, so you ordered the wines, and this is the fun part. In some places, you just get this kid that'll bring a bottle of wine over to you. In some restaurants, you might have a maitre d' or a sommelier bring the wine, and that's where the fun can happen. So they're going to take the wine, present the bottle to you, and while you're talking a little bit, yeah, that's right. Examine the bottle. Look at different things on that label because mistakes happen. Number one, let's say you've ordered a Sauvignon Blanc and it says on the menu, it's a 2022. Hey, it's fresh, it's clear. The older the Sauvignon Blanc gets, the duller, the flabbier it becomes. And so, yeah, that's what I want. But sometimes they run out of it. Maybe they found something on deal and they got something different with an older vintage. So make sure you got the vintage that you ordered. And you also got the wine that you ordered. I was at Quail Creek Restaurant and I ordered a Rutherford Merlot. And I got a Merlot, but it wasn't a Rutherford. And so I sent it back and they said, oh, well, I guess we don't have any. But they actually presented me the wrong bottle. So something to think about. So vintage, the right label, and so on with that.
Yeah. $100 bottle and you're right.
Well, so yeah, you gotta take a look at that. You've got to take a look at sometimes it could have the right label, the right producer, the right everything, but instead of a Cabernet, it could be a Merlot or it could be something different. So check. Don't just say, yep, that looks right. Check the label to make sure you're getting the right one. And then what he's going to do, he's going to open it up and take the cork out and pass you the cork. Don't sniff the cork. It's a test. With the sommelier, they pass you the cork, and the first is, this guy sniffed this cork, I know he doesn't know anything about wine. So if you don't sniff it, you examine, and what you're going to examine it for is for certain things. If you've got an old wine, and it's sitting down there, and it's, let's say 6, 7 years old, and you open the cork, and it gives you the cork, and there's just a little faint bit of red on the top, maybe that wine wasn't sitting down, it might have been standing up and on the shelf, it might be his last one or something that you have as a display one. You should see some good coloring. With a good cab, you'll also see cartridge, these little diamonds or little pieces of glass looking things on there where the acids, we got 14 in wines, you've got 14 major acids on some of these heavy duty wines that break down over time and it becomes softer and softer. The tannins become softer and softer, and these little things fall out of them and they go on the cork. So you want to see that. What you don't want to see when you're looking at the cork, when he gives it to you, is the staining that goes all the way through a cork, where you could see that, especially on the seam of the bottle, that can egress all the way to the top and above. And if he passes you the cork and you see wickage like serious, there's a good chance that wine might not be good. It might be oxidized, that cork didn't hold up. Cork is I could talk about corks too all day. But anyways, the cork is a natural product. It's the only substance, either natural or man-made, that you could actually compress to 50% of its volume and it'll spring back all the way. Usually like things are like a balloon where you squeeze here and it'll pop out the side. Cork has 40 million 14-sided cells per cubic millimeter. And these things collapse and come back up again. And each one of them contain little pockets of air. And those little pockets of air inside a heavy-duty bottle of wine produce small amounts of micro-oxidation, which lets these wine acids develop slowly and carefully. So it actually helps with heavy-duty wines. So you want to make sure that that cork held up to its part of the job. It's a natural product cut out of an oak tree in Portugal, or 60% of them are. And being a natural product, there are things that can happen. There are insects that can bore through a cork. There are molds that could happen if they're not stored properly, or if they leave them on the ground instead of putting it on cement. Things like that. They are doing better at them now, but there was a time in Portugal where 10% of the corks were coming in defective. I rejected, even my last year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 or 4 million corks from the suppliers. And I know that they didn't go back to Portugal. They went to another winery or somewhere else that was maybe quite as on guard for defects in corks. So anyways, you're looking for it, and if you see the cork is defective, really bad defective, reject the wine right there. If you've got some sort of leakage that comes almost to the top, but not quite, but you can see it's kind of brown around the edges, that still could be a warning sign. So you be on guard for the taste and flavor. So if you kind of then pour, does anybody want to see this thing at all? You got the idea of the red stripe, I don't know if you can see it, but the wine actually came off the top. So let's go ahead.
Bad, you're gonna be taking sampling in like anything.
You're going to be tasting it anyways, but you're going to be on super guard on this one. You're going to, first of all, if it's really oxidized, you're going to see a color shift. You're going to see that that wine is not that deep red that you're expecting. It's going to be tinges of orange and.
Yeah, I used to serve wine,
Mhm.
nice restaurant, well, that'll fit. People would send the wine back, and I come back, and it's perfectly fine. People rave about wine, leave it, they left, I go back, they were raving about it bad. So you run into that consumer, they really don't know.
A lot of consumers don't know, and because it could well be with the food they're eating. If they're having a heavy duty cab with something that's totally opposite, that wine's gonna taste like crap. And that could be something that simple. That's where the bridge ingredients help out. So when that does happen, you gotta take sometimes a look at that. I also, well, it's so you get the cork. You're going, if you didn't reject it already because he's gonna pour some in a glass, you're gonna look at the color before anything. And if it's around the right color, it could go, this wine could leak to the edge and still not have a problem. It still could be good. It could close up and still hold up, or it may not. It's 50-50 at this point when it goes that far. So you take a look at it, you hold it up against the light or a white background, and it looks like the right color, swirl it around, you're going to take a sniff, and you may not really smell a lot of good stuff, but you don't want to smell anything bad. Does anybody know what TCA, trichloroanisole, is? It's like 5-10% of the natural corks have this little defect. It smells like wet dog, wet grass. It's just this defect that happens with some corks. And that could be a defect with it. You'll smell that right away. I could detect 3 parts per trillion because I've been trained at it. You do it enough, you smell enough corks, you get the hang of it. But at certain levels, it becomes very powerful at 20, 30, 40 parts per trillion. It's now just to give you an idea how powerful TCA is. The normal people, average person could detect 5% TCA of 5 parts per trillion TCA. What that is, if I filled Arizona Stadium with ping pong balls right to the top, and there's with white ones, and there's 3 orange ones in there, That's the level of perception of TCA. That's how strong and powerful that stuff is that you could detect in flavors. Sure.
And PCA also has the winery.
It has, I won't mention their name, but there was a winery right next to one of my favorite restaurants that had to take their roof off. They had to take all the wood out of the inside. Folio Winery had been, wine writers have been talking about TCA in all their wines, and they actually took them to court. And they were actually, the writers were able to prove that all their wines had TCA. And it was because of the building and the wood gets in there and it's a mold and the whole bit. And they actually had to strip it to the cement and start all over again, unfortunately. So, yeah, it can happen, yes.
One Ron Forks and PCA and Agent Wine. Will, go back to Screaming Eagle, they did have their wine smell, they'll do it, Forks and half, blue cat, what's your opinion?
That wasn't Screaming Eagle, that was Plumpjack. Plumpjack decided to do a test with screw caps, where half of it was screw cap and half of it was real cork. And that, by the way, is the governor of California, his winery. And what happened, you couldn't buy just a screw cap, you had to buy one of each. And what we found out, which we knew already was going to happen, you don't have the micro oxidation take place with screw cap. It didn't age the same way. When you tasted it, it was very astringent. You had to open it 2 or 3 days, let it sit, refrigerate it so it didn't go bad, and then slowly it would pick up and start to age. It picked up quick, but it still wasn't the same flavors as something that had the micro
Better
oxidation.
wine, believe it was.
I 100%. Well, I've been involved with many studies, many tastings, and I was a cork guy, and I help people. White wines that need to be, any wine that needs to be drank within a year or two of bottling should be in a screw cap. New Zealand, where all their wines are basically ready to drink, everything is screw cap. And screw caps can still have problems. When you have a screw cap, if you start opening it and it starts to slip on you before it opens, you have to hold the bottom of it to open it. I won't mention the winery's name, but there was a winery from New Zealand that we're involved with, and they shipped over 2 loads of it. They had a 32 head filler. One head was screwed up where it didn't seal properly. We had to reject millions of bottles, and they had to visually inspect and reject those wines out of the whole bit. I won't mention it. Yes.
Okay, so are you saying, a wine is ready to drink right away, you have a screw up?
I firmly, yep. And the reason for that, very simply, is for the micro oxidation. It needs to age in the bottle at the right temperature, sitting properly in the whole bit. And if you do that, I've got wines that are 28, 30 years old in my cellar right now that I know that they're still good.
Okay, both white and red.
Both white and red, yeah. And you'll see a lot of screw caps with light or red, yes.
Where is this, these are, because they were artificial. Buy a bottle, you don't know it, or it's artificial real. Right.
Well, fortunately, a lot of the artificial corks are gone. There are a lot of rubber corks and all that type of stuff. Rubber has the ability to pull out the flavors, the fruit flavors of the wine. If I put a rubber cork in one of these things and turn it on its side, within 6 months, you'll lose the fruit flavor. It makes it a dead wine. And so those companies really, they sold a lot and then you don't see them anymore. The biggest thing in the industry right now is that, and I had to fight for it. We had to pay extra for it. It's the only supplier in the world where you have to pay extra to have better quality, have them inspect and take out their defects as corks. They have machines now where the cork goes through and it can detect 2 parts per trillion TC on every cork at 1,000 corks an hour or whatever, 100. You pay $100 a 1,000 or something, but when you have a $300 bottle of wine going bad at 3% level because of TCA, at least they could get it better. So the quality of corks have improved because they're able to pull out the defects better. So you'll see less and less defects. You could still have corks that break if it's a dry year or you've got a defective cork. If that happens in a restaurant and you screw them, cork breaks inside, reject the bottle because don't even bother fighting with it. Just no, I want one with a better cork than that. He won't argue with that right away. So going back, any other questions?
Well, I find even some better wines, they're pork, still a lot of difference in quality of pork. And then talk to different winemakers, but cost difference between various pork dramatic.
It is huge. I can pay, what different sizes do. There are different size corks and you pay for the different size corks. You've got to punch it out differently out of the actual bark. They cut the bark, they cut every 9 years. If you go through Portugal forest, cork forest, you'll see that they've got these big white numbers on 9, 6, 7. That's the year that they strip the cork off the trees. It grows back every 9 years. They go back to it again and the cork grows back and you slip it off. Well, with a thicker cork, you've got to go with thicker bark with no defect. Because the first little bit is defective, the back little bit's defective. So you need more top cork, so they do cost a lot more because they're harder to find. Yes.
Are these called cork trees?
Yeah, they're oak cork tree. They're called, it's a variety of cork, of oak that the cork bark, it's a natural development because they have the same type of climate as Northern California, where you've got very dry years and you've got fires. The cork bark saves the trees. Actually, if there's a forest fire going through, that thick bark doesn't hurt the trees, it saves it. So it was an actual thing that happened over a million years to have this happen. So it doesn't hurt the cork by stripping it off, it'll grow back again, it's no problem. And it's like the biggest thing in Portugal, I think, for dollar-wise. Just to finish this off. Yeah, so you're going to check to make sure it's the right appellation. To make sure it's from the area, you could have the right label on it and everything else, but it's maybe not from Napa, maybe it's from Paso Robles, which still makes great wines, but it's not what you buy. So you're going to check that. Okay, so you're going to I'm at the point where I pour it in the glass and you swirl it around, you sniff it, everything's good, you're going to taste it. Now, because it was just opened up, if it's a good solid wine, it needs to open a little bit longer. So you're not going to taste a great fruitiness or anything like that at this point. And so, but what you're going to detect is anything that's bad. If it's bad, you're going to know. You're going to taste it. You're going to feel this. It's just very bad flavors. Then the thing to do too, most restaurants ask for a decanter for the red wine if it's a big red, and they usually have them. They just don't take it out unless somebody asks, and just pour it in the decanter and it'll open up a lot faster. Same thing with the white wine. Ask for one of those coolers to put it into. They usually have them. Make sure you ask for that because serving wines at certain temperatures brings out great flavors as well. Sometimes white wines are served too cold and red wines are served too warm. One test sommelier, we had 3 sommeliers and we had these training sessions too from them. And he had us do a test where you open a bottle of wine, pour it into a red wine, pour it into a glass, seal it up, put the cork back in it, put it in the fridge for 1 hour. Take it out of the fridge, it dropped the temperature to 55 degrees, pour it into a glass, open the other wine up that was sitting on the counter, tasted 2 wines. The one that was chilled tasted 10 times fruitier than the one that was served at warm temperature. So slightly cool red wine brings out the fruit flavors a lot faster as well. So just a little piece of information there. Okay, so we talked about cork versus screw cap. That's it. Any questions about what I had yapped about so far? Yes.
White wine in corks. You can't see the stain or anything, or you don't worry about it.
Well, you can see the stain, it will turn it brown, but you will see a brown all the way through, and it almost turns like an orangish brown. And if it goes all the way through, you'll see it again, but a lot more white lines do have screw caps on now too. We have some, yes.
Is there,
Assuming that the, consider a box wine thing.
Box wines, there are some great box wines out there, and they have really improved. There's less problems with them, there are some really good ones. For some high-end wines, maybe not so much, but for the lower end, for the $20 bottles of wine, there's some great. Again, it's in a plastic bag. So drink it, don't store it, because that plastic will slowly take out some of the fruit. But it also prevents a lot of oxidation, because as it lowers, you're not adding water, air to it. So it's safe. So other than that, if you get a fresh box wine, you know, some of those things are pretty good. Black Box and some of these other ones doing a great job. Yes.
is there somewhere we can access your slides? Because I'm not gonna remember every.
I will let him have a copy of it, and he will have that. We didn't talk about the wine wheel got kicked out. That was the only thing I missed, so I apologize. I had some major issues with my computer. And last week, when I went to check, as some of you heard, what happened was that all my pictures were correct. So I had to delete all my pictures. And I have a wine wheel here. The wine wheel was introduced by a couple of friends of mine. Here we go. And basically, I've only got 10 minutes. I got 5 minutes. Okay, so what the wine wheel does, and you could see it online. I couldn't reproduce it because I couldn't get a hold of Van Noble, who I know, and Richard Arnold, the winemaker who helped with this, gave me permission for the Air Force so I could copy it. I couldn't get permission to copy it. Not that I couldn't, I just didn't get permission for it. So we have one of these things here that you can have too if you want. It talks about all this, but the aroma wheel is very general. Then it goes more specific and then exact. And what some of these things are, for example, fruitiness. You've got citrus, the grapefruit and lemon and Sauvignon Blanc, berry, blackberry, strawberry, black currant. You could get in Merlots and Syrahs and so on. Tropical fruit, again, you could get in Chardonnays and Sauvignon Blancs and Pinot Grigios. Then you get the nuttiness, walnut, hazelnut, almond, sometimes in some red wines. But then you get to some of the bad ones: petroleum, diesel, kerosene, tar, plastic. That's a defect that you could actually smell and taste in wines. Pungent smells, very sulfur dioxide. Sometimes we add sulfur to the bottle to help protect it. And if you open up and sniff this thing and get sulfur, it'll dissipate. Just swirl around a couple more times, that sulfur smell will go away. I got 3 more minutes. So anyways, I'll leave these sheets here, that basically has each of these things broken down a little bit more. And these I know I can do if I help draft this one up. And so these are from the dog and one. And I'll leave some of those if anybody's interested. Any other questions? Oh, come on, one more question and I give it.
Real quick, you don't have one, but Chardonnay is on bio wine. There's no ripeness, black ripeness, malolactic, non, higher acidity, malolactic. Drop that down. Do you have any preferences?
Well, it depends what I'm eating. Does everybody know what malolactic fermentation is? Have you ever tasted a buttery Chardonnay, real buttery? We take wine grapes, convert with yeast from sugars into alcohol. There's a secondary fermentation where we add a bacteria that break down a certain acid to make a lactic acid, which gives you the buttery flavor. It's a totally separate operation. We do it a little bit with reds to make a softer tannin sometimes, but we do it with the buttery Chardonnays It's called Buttery. It's actually one of the ones that actually do a big one, but the Rube, I can't remember the winemaker's name. But he did it and his wine just got sold to Gallo, actually. Any more questions? 30 seconds?